Well, let's talk about electricity again and the lack of it and possible solutions. One of those that's been touted around for a couple of years now is Karpowership. That's right, it's back in the news. One step closer, we understand, to docking in South African waters. Environmental Affairs Minister Barbara Creecy has reportedly dismissed at least 5 appeals from different lobby groups. Now, this power ship is going to supply, if it was to happen, 1,220 megawatts to the grid. It's an awful amount of power, but there's concerns about the cost to the taxpayer and the environment. Well, it's always good to hear from Independent Energy Analyst Hilton Trollip, making time for me this morning. Hello, Hilton. Good to have you back on ENCA. So there's 3 things I'd like to talk about. First of all, cost to the taxpayer, then environmental, and I'll get there in a moment. The first thing I'd like to ask, though, just for someone, a layman like me, 1,220 megawatts, adding that to the grid, what difference does that make to us as a country? Just help me try and understand that.
Good morning, Gareth, and to everybody else. So 1,200 is about 1.2 stages of load shedding that the Karpowerships could help us avoid. And they are dispatchable generators, so they can be switched on at any time. But as you know, there's been a lot of controversy, and there's good reason for it.
Yeah, let's talk about those reasons. What is your view on using something like Karpowership? Yes, there's a cost to the taxpayer, as I mentioned, also environmental, but this is why I want to get you on, get your thoughts. What are your concerns?
So firstly, you asked environmental. Karpowership used the COVID regulations, the emergency declaration, first of all, to try and sidestep the environmental regulations. And they put in an application, and it was, I think, first slipped through, but then the Environment Department picked it up and they refused it. They then put in an appeal, and they weren't granted leave to appeal because there were process deficiencies. For that read, they tried to get around the law, and there were also content deficiencies. For that read, the EIAs, the applications for environmental approvals, did not contain what they needed to contain. And it seemed from the beginning that Karpowerships thought that they could just, in a cavalier way, just ride straight through South African law, and they hit the environmental minister, and she stopped them on a number of occasions. She has given them now the approval to resubmit their bid, and all the renewable projects, there are 10,000 in the pipeline, have been, the approval process has been shortened for the lot of them. Karpowerships haven't been given a special deal there. So let's see this time around if they in fact do pass environmental muster. We've got very good laws and very good courts. So we'll see what happens there. And I won't give a view on the environmental characteristics except in the area that I know, which is climate change and emissions. And there they're very heavy carbon dioxide emitters, and we have far better solutions. And in the time taken for these various Karpowership applications to fail, we could have built a whole lot of renewables, which we haven't done. And one of the main reasons is because the Karpowerships are there, and they're saying, well, we're going to get Karpowerships, we're going to get coal, we're going to get nuclear, and they're not building renewables. And that's a big problem.
Yeah, and I've heard this criticism before, holding off on what could have been done because already some deals and discussions in passages and corridors of power have already taken place. I'm going to come back to the renewables in just a moment as well. Maybe we can tie that into my next question, Hilton, about the cost of these Karpowerships. Maybe you can juxtapose the cost of this if you know the numbers or just the exorbitant amount we're looking at as a country versus building renewables in probably about the same amount of time and not destroy the environment and not be tied into 20-year contracts.
Yeah, sure, Gareth. So I did an analysis of the costs at the time that they were announced. The big problem, there are a number of problems, but the biggest problem then was that they were going to get given a contract where Eskom would be obliged to pay by 50% of their total capacity over a period of 20 years, which was quite frankly outrageous because we would be paying about 3 to 4 times what we're paying on average for our existing power at the moment from our entire fleet. We'd be paying 10 times what we pay for renewables, and we'd be forced to pay it. It's called a take or pay agreement, whether we needed it or not. And that was just, I'm amazed that the Energy Ministry tried to bash that through the system, which they've clearly been trying to do. They're clearly I don't think that they're an impartial adjudicator in this case. They're clearly on the side of Karpowerships to the extent that they try to lump South Africa with an unaffordable contract for 20 years, way after we hope to get over load shedding. And just an aside there, Gareth, Ghana has gone through a similar process with this company, with Karpowerships. Ghana is currently in the process of negotiating a structural adjustment program with the IMF. Their government is in so much debt, and one of the biggest debts is to independent power producers, of which Karpowerships company is one. And in Ghana, they are playing hardball. They've told the Ghanaian government that they've threatened to cut power to Ghana if Ghana doesn't pay them. They've said they won't restructure their debt to Karpowerships. And that's exactly the kind of pathway we were being dragged down by our government wanting to sign that 20-year
It could be a case of almost our electricity supply, if that were to happen here, our electricity supply could be held hostage, essentially over a paycheck, which is the concern. Hilton, I wanted to say goodbye to you in a moment. Forgive me. I wanted to say goodbye in a moment. Talk to me about IPPs. You're saying so there are other ways of doing this. Many, many people agree. Just remind me what this looks like in your view, IPPs or the next couple of years, what we could do instead of something like a Karpowership.
Well, Karpowerships is an IPP. What an IPP is that a private player on its own costs develops a generating solution, and they then sign a contract with Eskom, which buys the power from them under what's called a power purchase agreement. So there are a number of IPPs. We can have solar PV, photovoltaics, wind. Those are the two main technologies, but there are also things called concentrated solar power, which can provide dispatchable power, and then we can have mixes of all of those. So as I said, the wind and the PV are 10 times cheaper than the car power offered, and could, in our particular system, the South African system, with the existing coal-fired power we've got, and our gas turbines, and our storage, they could definitely solve all of the load shedding at the moment. They take about 2 years to build, but you've got to start building them. And this is where we've got a big problem. The renewable energy, the energy department, the minerals and energy department, and the minister are just making as though they're having these bid rounds for IPPs, but they're failing.
Yeah,
that's where the problem lies.
Yeah, many people are saying that is exactly the issue. They're kicking the proverbial tin down the road further and further. Hilton Trollip, it's always good to speak to you.